parable of talents. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Oh, Lord, we just thank you for your presence here. We thank you for our worship team opening our time here. Lord, may we be open to what you have to say to us. Lord, be on my tongue, be on my heart, in your name. Amen. Whew. Worship was great. Got really emotional with that. That was great. So this parable, it kind of took a couple turns for me when I started getting older. So traditionally, like when I was a little kid and you go to Sunday school and they tell you this, the parable of the talents, they like to, often tell you like, oh, God gives you talents and he has called you to be invested in those talents and you should really work at your talents and, don't let your talents and your abilities go to waste, and that's a really awesome thing to tell children as they're growing up. Like, you're gifted, you're talented, know what those are. It's part of God's joy in you. It's part of worship participating in that. Grow in those things. But there was a part that always bothered me, and it was the part where there was the 3rd servant who didn't invest in the talent, and what happened to the servant in the end? I mean, the punishment is brutal. I mean, literally the explanation is that the master comes home and sends them to hell for not investing in their talents. That always really bothered me. Like if I don't play the bassoon good enough, would I go to hell? It's just like, did Jesus really come and die on the cross so I could bake a cake and not burn it? Certain things just didn't really add up to me at all with that, and it bothered me. And yes, it is a great message to tell kids to invest in their talents and their skills and explore that. That's a wonderful message. But it bothered me because I thought, there's no way that can be what this is really about, And so when you start to kind of think through it, something that we do with Scripture is we look for consistencies and patterns, right? And so I started noticing when I looked at other parables that every single time there was something of like value or money, like the parable of the lost pearl, or the parable of the lost coin, or the parable of the hidden treasure. Jesus always opened saying, the kingdom of heaven is like this. Well, what is the kingdom of heaven? It's people, right? So whenever in a parable, Jesus told a story and there was like some valuable item that shows up in the story, it's always symbolic of people in some kind of way. And then, I'm like, okay, well, let's just run with that. Let's just run with some consistency here, that the talents are not talents at all. They're people. What if they're people? Maybe it's just, that one of those things that when we translated something from Greek into English, the word talent was the name for the money, and it happens to be something in the English. It's probably not the same in Spanish Bibles or whatever, But it's just the point that it's about money, that the parable of this money is being given. What would the money then represent if we didn't assume it meant a talent or a gifting? And I started kind of thinking a little bit more about that makes so much more sense, because in the end, Jesus died on the cross for what? People, right? We're what's super valuable, and we're so valuable to him that when he connects with the third servant, it's kind of rough there, it starts to make a little bit more sense. So the other little piece that, I thought, okay, so maybe the parable of talent is to be understood that God has invested in us people that we are to invest in. Well, that's looking at consistency of this idea of what the money should represent. But then looking at literary context, like, okay, well, let's look at that. Well, where does this parable land? This parable lands right between the parable of the 10 virgins and the sheep and the goats. Now, the sheep and the goats has really been on my heart lately. I gave a chapel message this month at the school on the sheep and the goats. And parable of talents goes right into that. And in the parable of the sheep and the goats, you've got the king arriving back, and he's dividing the people. There's the sheep and there's the goats. And the sheep and the goats pose the same question, hey, when did we ever see you sick or in prison or naked or hungry or any of these things? And God says, whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me, right? And the goats asked the same question. It was always about, how are you doing with the people in your lives? What are you doing with the people in your lives? God's entrusted people into our lives. How are you doing with that? And so for this message, for the last month and a half, I keep coming back around to this idea of that I'm supposed to talk about empowering us to recognize the people in our lives. The fall has just started. All of our schedules flip over, and we get super busy because our life just became about being task-oriented, right? We're very, very task-oriented. It's been a really hard task-oriented month for me, But that's not, Jesus didn't die on the cross so I could get my attendance in really fast. I need to get my attendance in really fast, but that, you know what I'm saying? That's not why Jesus died on the cross. He didn't die on the cross so I could get my ducks in a row. He died on the cross because he cared about me, and he cared about you, and he cares about all the people that are in our lives. That's what this is really about, not the tasks. And I don't know about you, but sometimes my big temptation in church during worship and message and everything is the big fight, the battle that goes on in my head when I'm sitting in the pew is to not think about what I have to do this week. Are you doing that right now? Come on, right now. You are all thinking about what you have to do tomorrow morning, right? No? Wow, you guys are really on it, because I fight that every single Sunday. I think that's the temptation that's hitting me, is to start thinking about Monday. So good for you. Good for you, because that's what I'd be thinking about. It's I'm trying so hard not to think about Monday. Because it's task, not being fully present and in the place where I know that I have a God that loves me, died for me, loves everyone, died for everyone, and I'm supposed to be completely consumed in that, because whatever happens this week, it is not about my little list. Literally, I had a day where I had this list of these things have to happen before I walk into sixth period I teach the first 2 periods of the day, and the last 2 periods of the day, we have a 7-period day. And the time in between, I have all these things that I need to do, but I'm also like one of the school counselors. And I got nothing on my list done, nothing. Because I just had students that kept dropping in to see me. And so I was like, okay, all right, let's, and I got nothing done. And I completely stressed out about it because I was forgetting my own message that, like, God's like, dude. So, okay, I'm probably just preaching to myself, just so you know. Okay? And then the whole part of, like, that would be false guilt that I beat myself up that I didn't work out my list. Because the people who dropped in on me were important. And I needed to stop what I was doing to be with them. That's what was important. Okay, so I need to deal with the false guilt of the list that didn't get marked off. So I don't know what's on your list. Whatever it is, I'm not saying it's not important. Those tasks are important. But we really got to work out sometimes when we grade ourselves on that list. Are we list makers? I'm a list maker. I look like I fly by the seat of my pants half the time, but I really am a list maker. I like, because I'm ping-ponging around, but I really am a list maker. And so when you look at the literary context of it, this is a parable right in the sandwich in the middle of these end time moments, of being called forward because the bridegroom's returning on the parable of the 10 virgins. The master has come home. In the sheep and the goats, the king has arrived, and there's this moment where you're going to face off with your maker, and it's a time of judgment. And it's not about being terrified whether or not you were good enough. Because this is the big twisted part of it, I think, okay? So if we want to focus on this parable of the talents as being about our talents, then it's about us, right? It's about investing in us. It's about, am I pouring into myself so much and so hard that I missed the person in front of me, the person next to me? In the end, God's not going to shame you because you poured into the person next to you. And when you look at the lives of our teenagers, they are filled with a lot of anxiety about who they're not who they're becoming as a person, but what they're becoming in society, right? They have to make the grade because they have to make the college so that they can make the career, right? That's all about them. And it kind of irritates me. I mean, it really gets me, actually. When they're so caught up on, like, there's a bar, there's a standard. I have to hit it. If I don't hit it, I'm going to fail. Okay, the crazy thing is that that's kind of what is happening with the third servant here, okay? The third servant was trying to get the 4.0. I mean, the third servant probably was a 4.0, the third servant was a 4.0 student because that takes a whole nother level of dedication that meant that they missed out on everything else that was real around them, right? And so we can kind of start to see that. The first servant that was given 5 people to care for, 5 talents, 5 people that God said, these 5 are for you to invest in. Right? They invested in those 5 people, not themselves. They invested in the 5 people. And they gained 5 more, right? The first servant had joined the battleship, right? I mean, when you look at that and you're choosing a ship to be on, the first servant picked the battleship. And so, I mean, I know that, like, Pastor Paul is always pouring in and pouring in and pouring into us. But it's not to just sit there and go, oh, thank you for spoon feeding me today. I'll be back next week. You can spoon feed me again. We're supposed to do something with that. We're supposed to go live our week differently and come back and he'll spoon feed us again, right? But we're supposed to go live that week differently because our time together mattered and it counted, right? unless we're making the list of all the stuff we have to do on Monday. Okay, and so the third servant is given one person to care for. And I think it's kind of funny, not funny, but like interesting, that they said that they hid the talent in the ground. Don't you wonder who the one person was? You know, maybe it was their kid, maybe it was their parent, maybe it was their sibling, maybe it was their neighbor, maybe it was a co-worker. Who was the one person that the third servant needed to, you know, reach out and love and care about and hear the story of and intervene and encourage? They hid that person, and you have to wonder, under what? They hid that person under their priorities, their commitments, their busy lives, their personal goals. I mean, what are you more likely to hide people under? We literally train our kids to hide people under this expectation to perform. We do. We're like they're taught that. And I feel like I'm always pushing against that. like pushing against that part of society. But they are taught that everyone is pouring into you, everything's about you, keep going for it, hit the grade, make the team, get the time off your mile. It's about you. In the end, it was about the kid they ran next to, and if they had some quality time with them and they built that person up. Not that they got, you know, time off their score or their race, right? But the anxiety is super high because we've made it about them versus helping them understand their place. Our place in this world is to lift each other up, not make it about us. And that's why the third servant, I totally think he like joined the cruise, you know, he or she joined the cruise line. You know, the cruise line was all about, the cruise ship was all about making sure that the space around them suited them, right? You can go on a cruise ship and not know anyone, right? I've never been on a cruise, but I know people who've been on cruises. That you can go on a cruise ship and you might make like friends with like 2 or 3 other people that you kind of met up with at the dinner table or the buffet or something. But for the most part, you can go on a cruise ship and not meet anyone, and everything is catered around you, right? And you growing in your skill set or whatever it be. But if you're on a battleship, there's communication throughout. Like everyone is on the same page. Everyone, you know people on the battleship. Not that I've ever been on a battleship, but it's got to be organized, right? And it's not about catering around one particular sailor. Like that's not the nature of it at all. And they're all moving together towards one great goal. And so, you know, when you look at that, there's maybe a little piece that feels convicted, like, ooh, I do kind of think on the cruise line mentality with church. But I also think along the cruise line, or the battleship mentality also. But the reality is we got to pick one. Weed out the cruise line mentality. It's a stumbling block. It's thinking that church is supposed to suit us, when it was all about us coming in to get to be part of pouring into something great. I think that when you're looking at the third servant's response, I think it's interesting when the first and second servant comes to the master. They never actually say their motive, and I'll come back to what I think their motive is for why they invested in their people, in their talents. But the third servant actually has a moment to speak, and he says, I knew you were a hard man, difficult to please. Okay, that kind of makes me angry that that's the third servant's response, because literally the third servant just blamed the master. Like blamed him. I'm like, it's like we've gone back to the garden, and God says to Adam, hey, Adam, what happened? And Adam says, it was the woman you put here. Right? Like the servant actually blames the master for why he did nothing and he hid his talent. Well, I knew you were hard. And the other part that kind of cracks me up about it is that to call the master hard and difficult to please completely contradicts something else we hear in the Bible, and that's from the prophet Jonah. What's Jonah's criticism of God? I knew you were merciful. You have Jonah criticizing God for being merciful. I didn't want to go to Nineveh. I knew you would be merciful and you would forgive them and that you loved them. How is this the same, the same master, the same God? I mean, the third servant, dude, it's just an excuse, right? It's an excuse and blaming God for why you did nothing, right? So then to look at the first and second servant and to look at them and say, okay, well, so what was their motive? Like, I don't think that their motive to invest in the talents was because they were scared of the master or scared of not following through. There's that part where I think that when we read it too, we read it with a little bit more joy, and then when the master says, come and share in your master's happiness, that there was joy in investing those talents, investing in them. And I think that it's not a matter of, because you have to be careful with this little part, that it's not a works answer, right? You have these guys who concretely went and did the right thing, and they get to go to heaven, and you have someone who concretely did not do the right thing, and they went to hell. Well, that's a works response, right? Like, if you do good, you go to heaven. If you do bad, you go to hell, right? Okay, well, that's not what's being taught here. I don't believe at all. I think there is this deliberate, excuse coming from the third servant. But the first and second servant, I think that their serving the people around them was not to have a relationship with the master. It was a result of a relationship with the master, right? It's just a result. I mean, if you're in love with Jesus and he calls you to love the people around you, loving them is just a result of loving God. And that salvation is because you are in relationship with him, right? And you're going to go be bold and have some fire about it, right? And so Pastor Cindy talked about when she preached last time to put a name of a person that you were going to start to pursue. How you doing with that? How are you doing with that? I wrote the name down of the person, and I wrote down a person that I don't really know, and I have not done super well with it. I totally let my tasks get the best of me. September happened, my tasks got the best of me, and I have not pursued this person as much as I'd hoped. But their name is down. I'm gonna do better. If I put them on my list, I should just put them on my list. My list will just be people, not tasks. That's what it should be. That's what all right, problem solved. I'm having my own little therapy session up here. All right, you're all invited. Okay. But I think that that's part of that little result in the relationship with God. And so with our youth group, so we're kind of taking an interesting little turn in our youth group right now. So first, we're just trying to get some of our students to be more steady. We have some kids that come Sunday night to youth group. They either don't belong to a church or they actually belong to other churches that don't have youth groups, so they come to youth group here. And we have connections and relationships with a whole base of kids. Over the course of the summer, we had over 50 kids attend our youth activities over the course of the summer. And we're building relationships with these kids and learning their stories. We opened up to them redoing their youth room so they could feel like this is, I left my mark here. I'm wanted here. I'm accepted here. And so we've been building that relationship, pouring and pouring into the kids. It's time they start pouring out. So we're taking a turn. That's right. Yeah, we're like, oh my gosh. I know. I'm almost a jerk sometimes. Well, not almost. But it's like, okay, we poured into you. It's time to step up. We're not going to just keep pouring into you because pretty soon it's just going to start to, you're just going to think that this is a cruise line. The youth room is not like the deck of a cruise ship. It's the deck of a battleship. Like each thing that we put up along the perimeter of the wall, or along the walls, has to do with where we're going and where we're heading with this group. And so we are taking this turn, and we're doing more servant-oriented activities. I'm totally not opposed to pouring into kids and having fun. Like, I think it's great that we go hiking. I want to hear their story while we go hiking. Water slides are super fun, yeah, so we go to Wild Waves. But it's about the car ride, right, and hearing a kid's story and letting them know that they matter. But now it's our turn to start to let other people know that they matter too. And what we're coming up against is that mentality they're being taught that everything is about them becoming better. What a lot of anxiety. You know what I'm saying? That you have to hit the grade, you have to hit that time, it's about you developing into this thing that can handle all things, when the reality is, in the end, that doesn't matter, right? So we're going to be doing, and you'll hear us kind of mention it at times, it's called the 30-hour famine. It's coming up for us in November. It'll be the weekend prior to Thanksgiving. And what it is, it's a program that World Vision has started about 20 years ago. So World Vision, if you know what World Vision is, they are a company that does where you can sponsor a child in another country for so many dollars a month. That child will get food and care, medical care, education, and they'll learn about Jesus. And there's kids, though, who are on the waiting list. So when you are looking to sponsor a child, there's always that cute little pamphlet with a darling little picture of the child and a little rundown about how they're from a family of 5 and, they're from this country and here's what's going on. World Vision does not go out, clean up a little kid, take their photo, ask their questions, write a little pamphlet, and then goes, okay, see you later, we'll let you know if somebody wants to support you. I mean, that would be really heartbreaking to a child. And so what World Vision wants to do is to immediately start giving that kid care while they're trying to find someone to sponsor that kid. Well, where does World Vision get the funds for all the kiddos on the waiting list? From kids like ours. Our youth group, youth groups all over the United States, do this thing called the 30-hour famine, and the money from that supports all the little kids who are on the waiting list, waiting for a sponsor to take them, so that they can be cared for till somebody says yes. So the 30-hour famine we're not really having like a famine, but it's a fast. We're going to be going 30 hours without eating. We'll be allowed to have water and chicken broth and juice and that at least, but we're not going to eat, and we're going to serve and do service projects and then spend the night in the church for that evening. And the 30 hours is we're not going to fast in vain, We're going to fast in the hopes that we raise money to support these kids who are in desperate situations. The thing is, we started raising money like little less than a month ago, like 3 weeks ago. We have not done really well with that. Yeah. They're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I know. Yeah, so we had our little famine rally. We all set goals of, how much money we wanted to raise to how many kids we're really hoping to care for. We have not done great out of the gate. We're going to get this, though, Why is it so hard to ask people to sponsor us? Because it's out of our normal routine. The normal routine is, it's about me, right? Normal routine is I've got all these things I got to worry about, and stopping to ask somebody and explain to them that there's kids, or the country we're supporting this year is Kenya. To stop and say, there's starving children in Kenya. They need sponsorship. They need to be helped. And I have an opportunity. I'm going to go 30 hours without eating. It won't do us any good to go 30 hours without food if we don't raise the money to feed the kids. So that's a little bit, like if you're going to go 30 hours, you better pack the biggest punch you can possibly make it pack, or make the punch. So the hard part is that unlike a missions trip where you square off this week and you just go and you're out of your normal routine and you get to go serve and do a missions trip, which I totally love those where you get out of your normal experience. The hard, challenging part of the famine is that you're supposed to care about people in the thick of your normal list of things you have to do. You have to pick the person over the task. That's hard. That's really hard. It's the same thing as you've got your list of things to do, and you got invited to prayer team again on Wednesday night. You know, prayer team is in the middle of a week of tasks. But you know what prayer team's about? It's about praying for people, right? It's about people. It's always about people. And so that's the hard bit, is we're so caught on tasks that we lose sight of when we stand before God, that he'll be like, dude, what did you do with the people I put in your life? You know, and understand it's a two-way street. God has placed you in the lives of other people because they're entrusted with you. I mean, if anything matters so much to him, it's you, and it's the person next to you, and it's the people out there, because he died for you. You're the most valuable thing that he could ever come up with. You matter to him, and he has entrusted you in the hands and lives of other people. It's that sad moment when we're all so worried about building ourselves up that we miss pouring into other people, and we think, yeah, but if I turned around and I started pouring into everybody else around me, there would be nothing left because I don't feel like I have people pouring into me. If that is where you're at right now, and that's the big hard part of who would pour into me, then that is such a fantastic opportunity to go and seek out a support group, because you know what? You need that. And we're supposed to be that, aren't we? If you're not feeling you've got people pouring into you so that you can pour out, then go seek that out. I can't complain. I have great people who pour into me. I do. I have great people who pour into me, you know? And sometimes I feel like, dude, okay, I'm totally exhausted, Lord, right now. And he's like, yeah, but have you, called the people who are pouring into you? Are you paying notice? Are you completely missing it? Sometimes we just are so consumed in ourselves, we don't even notice the people who are praying for us and pouring into us. When you think about certain people, this is a little part that gets hard, and I'm going to wrap up here, is that when you think about certain people, you're like, okay, all right, I know who my 2 are, my 1, I know who my 5 are. I know more than that. I'm overwhelmed just thinking about everybody that God's kind of placed in my life. But maybe just start with your top 2 or your top 5 or the top 1 that you know you're supposed to pour into. And whatever you do, don't make an excuse, okay? When you think about certain people, do you find yourself making excuses, like finding wrongs about them that make them not worth investing in? That one kills me. That one I get a lot from some of the teens that I meet with is, well, I'd pour into them, but what good would it do? They're totally stuck in their ways, or they're completely blind to this, or they're whatever. And there's an excuse. I'm not pouring into that person because that person's like this. You know, it's like, well, dude, if you get clever in how you pour into them and pray for them, because there's power in that, and you might actually see some fruit coming, you know, in those things. And then the other hard thing is, don't find excuses about your responsibilities and busy work so that you don't have to invest in certain people. That is one of the things that, I do at Three Rivers Christian School is I set up mission trips. And so we have 4 trips that we'll be doing in the fall that I'm setting up, and I have teams of kids on each one. And I would love it if every kid was like dying to go on a missions trip, you know? And what's hard for me is when some kids are like, no, I'm not gonna go. And like, okay, well, why is that? And some kids, I mean, I'm fine if they don't quite seem ready to go anyways. But when they say, well, I don't really have the time, you know, you don't have the time? Like, we make a point not to assign homework on Fridays. You have the whole weekend. You're not in a sport right now. And the reality is, it's the idea of, it's not that we don't have time to invest in people, it's that we don't want to sacrifice certain opportunities, certain things in our lives already. I mean, that's what it's about. You don't want to give up time watching things on YouTube. You don't want to give up your video game time. You don't want to give up. There's little ways we like to entertain. We don't want to give up our entertainment, right? Okay? We have a generation that's raised that the most valuable thing is to be entertained. And the one thing you would never sacrifice is being entertained. And the goal in life is to get that job, make enough money, so you can get tickets to whatever you want, so you can go be entertained, because that's life. It's kind of lonely too. But that's what we're taught. And that's just what we're constantly being exposed to. So, in the end, the last little observation is that in the end, the servants, they didn't stand before each other. They stood before the master, right? In the end, they stood before the master, and everything they did between them and the people in their lives was actually between them and the master, right? We get to the end of the sheep of the goats, and he says, whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. When you make that list of maybe the 5 people that God's placed in your life to pour into, whatever excuse that we might come up with why we wouldn't have to, think about, that's Jesus. Would you not pour into Jesus? We can't make those excuses. I speak to this because I'm full of it. I'm full of them myself. So I have 3 of the teens that are going to come up. Where did I put that microphone? And there is a poem. Come on up. There's a poem by, it wasn't written by Mother Teresa, but Mother Teresa adapted this classic poem. And so you might be more familiar with this adaptation. But I want you to listen to it and think of it this way, that, how do I have this set up? That the first servant, okay, oh wait, you're the first student? Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, well, okay, so think of it this way. So there's the first servant, right, that is like the battleship servant, okay? And you got the third servant, who's kind of like the cruise ship servant, right? Their mentality, their understanding of life, their understanding of the church, their understanding of their roles, totally contradicting each other. And so I want you to think of, let's see, so Matthew, you're second. So Mariah here is the third servant. She's the cruise line. She's dressed for cruise ship, okay? Matthew's our battleship. And Tessie's our master in the end, all right?
People are often unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered.
Forgive them anyway.
If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish or ulterior motives.
Be kind anyway.
If you are successful, you will win some unfaithful friends and some genuine enemies.
Succeed anyway.
If you are honest and sincere, people may deceive you.
Be honest and sincere anyway.
What you spend years creating, others will destroy overnight.
Create anyway.
If you find serenity and happiness, someone may be jealous.
Be happy anyway.
The good you do today will often be forgotten.
Do good anyway.
Give the best you have, and it will never be enough.
Give your best anyway.
In the final analysis, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you for that, guys. All right, let's pray. Lord, we just thank you for being a God who is so patient with us and someone who has placed such intense value upon us, Lord. Father, I just pray right now you help us to see who it is that you are calling us to take a greater notice in, what tasks can wait and be set aside for the sake of the people that are in our lives, Lord. That anxiety and that stress that pushes us towards our tasks, Lord, that we just realize that you are the God who conquers it all and who overcomes even the anxiety that we might feel, the pressure we might feel. May we be people who take our blinders off and we see clearly that we have a purpose of being here, Lord. And God, that purpose is not just about building some form of building ourselves up in our own empires, Lord, but that you've called us to build up those people in our lives. And in that, God, we are going to have such a more amazing understanding of who you are and your heart and your beauty. And Lord, we want that. And so, Lord, may we have this week just desiring and chasing after you by running alongside what you have going on. May we be awakened to it. We give you this time. We love you and thank you. In your name.